"Ma'am, step away from the tower." That was the first thing I heard when I turned into my driveway Tuesday evening, right after my truck tires hit the cattle guard and right before I saw Patricia Hensley standing in my back lane like she was posing for campaign photos. She had one hand on her hip, one manicured finger pointed dramatically at my windmill, and a county code officer trying very hard to keep everyone calm. Behind them were 2 city trucks, 3 members of the Willow Glen HOA board filming from different angles for the neighborhood app, and at least 6 residents pretending to walk their dogs in a perfect semicircle around my fence. If you've never had your own backyard turned into community theater, I don't recommend it. The windmill in question stood exactly where it had stood for years. 28 feet of galvanized steel over a concrete pad, fenced setback, lockout lever chained in place, auto brake fin aligned, permit tag bolted to the south leg where anyone with functioning eyesight could read it. It wasn't decorative and it wasn't new. It was an agricultural wind pump tied into the Cooper lateral backup lift line, installed after the wildfire years when everyone suddenly discovered that municipal pressure can drop to a trickle at the worst possible moment. But Patricia was in full performance mode. "She's finally here," she announced to the crowd, as if she'd caught me fleeing the scene of a crime. "Officer, this is the homeowner. I told dispatch there was an unapproved mechanical hazard threatening adjacent lots." Adjacent lots. The nearest adjacent lot to that tower was my own pasture strip and half a row of junipers I'd planted before she moved in. I got out of my truck, shut the door slowly, and did the thing my dad used to call keeping your boots on the ground. Breathe once, look around, decide who actually has authority and who has volume. "Evening," I said to the code officer first, not Patricia. His badge said R. Delgado. He looked tired in the way public employees look when they've been sent to referee neighborhood politics. "Miss Cooper," he said, "we got a safety complaint. I just need to verify structure status and setbacks." "Sure. Permit placards on the south leg. Installation files in the utility box if you want copies." Patricia made an outraged sound like I'd cut her off in traffic. "You can't just put rural machinery in a planned community and wave papers around. As HOA president, I have full authority over exterior structures in Willow Glen." I looked at her. "You have authority over HOA rules. You don't outrank county permits." A few of the dog walkers exchanged that hungry look people get when the argument they came for starts on schedule. That's probably the moment I should introduce myself the way my lawyer eventually told me to introduce myself at all meetings, because context matters. "I'm Taylor Cooper. Lot 1, Willow Glen." Not because I bought the first lot, but because Lot 1 used to be the old Cooper homestead parcel before the North Fields were subdivided. My parents sold the development rights with easements, utility provisions, and water conveyance language that could choke a horse. I inherited what remained: the house, the lane, the lateral crossing, and enough history to make every map in county records feel personal. For 6 years after inheriting, I kept my head down. I fixed shared fence lines before people asked. I lent my trailer when somebody needed mulch. I showed up at HOA meetings only when they were trying to ban drought-tolerant landscaping in a county that goes brown every August. I was not a crusader. I was not looking for a fight. I was trying to be the neighbor who made living here easier. Patricia made that harder from the day she became HOA president and discovered the phrase uniform standards. Mailbox heights became a campaign. Holiday lights needed tone consistency. She once sent a warning notice over a wheelbarrow visible from the street. Most people rolled their eyes and paid the $50 to make her go away. Then she noticed my windmill. I watched Officer Delgado examine the tower legs, inspect the pad, and check the placard against his clipboard. He did a full loop around the fence and looked up at the rotor with the practical expression of someone who has seen actual hazards and knows this isn't one of them. "Structure appears compliant," he said finally. "No immediate public danger observed. I'll file the inspection notes." Patricia snapped her phone toward him. "Compliant by whose standards? It's industrial." "By county standards, ma'am," he said, already walking back toward his truck. She spun to the group and raised her voice. "You all saw this. This is exactly why communities need strong enforcement." One of the board members kept filming while nodding solemnly, like a backup singer. I stood at my fence and felt that old split open inside me, the one between keeping peace and telling the truth plainly. Water is politics where we live. It always has been. Rainfall swings, wells dip, pump stations fail, and everyone suddenly remembers they care about infrastructure. People here will ignore a culvert for 10 years, then panic when pressure drops before Labor Day and their lawns crisp in 2 days. The windmill wasn't a lawn ornament. It was part of a system designed to keep flow moving when grid power hiccuped or peak draw spiked. Not glamorous, not Instagram-friendly, useful. Patricia didn't care what it did. She cared what it looked like and who got to command whom. By the time the crowd dissolved, she had told at least 3 people that legal notices were coming. She said it loudly enough for me to hear and smiled when she said it. I went inside, fed my old border collie, Moose, microwaved leftovers, and told myself this would burn out. Code came, inspected, found compliance, and a story. Maybe she needed a public scene to save face with her followers on the app. Maybe she'd get distracted by someone's trampoline color. At 6:12 the next morning, my inbox proved me wrong. Subject line: Urgent HOA enforcement action. Safety abatement. Attached were 12 pages on HOA letterhead, signed by Patricia and copied to the property manager, board, neighborhood distribution list, county planning office, and our shared insurance carrier contact. I read it once standing at the kitchen counter and once again sitting down, because the first read made me too angry to process details. Violation 1. Unsafe mechanical apparatus presenting foreseeable failure risk. Violation 2. Visual blight incompatible with established residential character. Violation 3. Unapproved exterior utility structure. Directive: remove and fully dismantle structure within 7 calendar days. Failure to comply: daily fines, lien initiation, legal referral, and self-help abatement by board-authorized contractor, costs charged to my lot. She had appended a paragraph claiming she had credible reports that the windmill was unpermitted and could catastrophically fail under moderate wind loading. Unpermitted. There are few things more insulting than being accused of skipping the one paperwork process you know by heart. I keep permit copies in 3 places: utility box, office file, and cloud storage. Because rural infrastructure paperwork is the difference between calm and catastrophe when someone gets ambitious. I drafted a response with attachments: county permit approval, engineer-stamped installation plan, final inspection sign-off, annual maintenance logs, and photos of safety features. I kept it neutral. No sarcasm, no as previously obvious, just facts. At 8:04 a.m. I sent. At 8:17 a.m. she replied, "Thank you for your submission. HOA standards supersede outdated rural rights. Immediate removal remains required pending board review." Outdated rural rights. That sentence sat on my screen like a dropped match in dry grass. I called the property manager, a patient woman named Elise, who had mastered the tone of someone forever trying to keep one side from suing the other. "Elise, I need to confirm," I said. "Did the board vote this?" "President issued emergency enforcement authority. she said carefully. Special board vote Friday to ratify. So no board vote yet. Just Patricia. Correct. But she believes there's safety urgency. Based on what? A pause. Her assessment. I thanked her and hung up before my voice got sharp. By noon, the neighborhood app had clips of my windmill shot from multiple angles with ominous captions. Is this safe? Do we want industrial equipment next to play areas? Board taking action. Patricia commented under each one with variations of, we are protecting property values. Then came the email chain. She had forwarded her packet to county planning, implying active code violations. She copied our insurer warning of known hazardous structure ignored by owner. She sent a mass note to homeowners saying non-compliant farm hardware jeopardized neighborhood standards and could increase premiums. She omitted one tiny detail. The system was legal, permitted, and connected to a water conveyance arrangement older than the HOA itself. By dinner, I had two neighbors texting me privately. One asking if my tower was about to collapse. Another asking if they should expect an emergency special assessment if the HOA sued me. Fear spreads faster than facts when people think their home value is in play. I spent that evening at my dining table with a yellow legal pad and a folder labeled Water/Easements/Legacy. My dad's handwriting covered half those files, all tidy block print and dates. I could hear him saying what he always said during irrigation season. If it isn't recorded, it's a story. If it's recorded, it's a right. The first page I pulled was the recorded easement map. The Cooper lateral crossing, access corridor, delivery language. I set it aside and pulled the permit file, then old maintenance invoices, then old correspondence from years before Patricia moved in. The status quo was dead. I could feel it. Until that morning, this had been another HOA annoyance. Petty, loud, solvable with documentation. But supersede outdated rural rights was not petty. It was an attempt to redraw legal boundaries by memo. If I caved, then any future board president with an aesthetic opinion and a mailing list could try to erase recorded infrastructure one violation notice at a time. And if I ignored it, she'd push self-help abatement and send contractors to dismantle protected equipment on my property. People think HOA disputes are about paint colors and lawn gnomes. Sometimes they are, but underneath those thin arguments can sit things that matter more than curb appeal. Drainage paths, utility corridors, water access, emergency backup systems. Once those are damaged, you don't solve it with a committee apology. You solve it with engineers and lawyers and checks nobody wants to write. That's what was at risk for me personally. My land rights, my liability exposure, my inherited obligations, and the simple principle that recorded agreements still mean what they say, even when they inconvenience someone's design preferences. But it wasn't only me. Willow Glen was built pretty brochures first, hydrology second. The development's domestic and landscape demand always ran tight in late summer. People didn't know that because for most years the system held together quietly. Part municipal feed, part storage, part delivery arrangements nobody read because water came out when you turned the tap. When those systems fail, they fail publicly. Patricia's crusade threatened the one piece of backup lifting infrastructure on my parcel. And she was doing it while grandstanding about community protection. If she succeeded, or even delayed operations with legal noise at the wrong time, families on her own block would feel it first in pressure drops, irrigation restrictions, maybe tanker fill orders if conditions lined up badly. Not apocalypse, just expensive, preventable disruption. And then there was the reputational risk, which sounds soft until you live in a neighborhood where rumor can become policy in 48 hours. She had already framed me as reckless. If I stayed silent, That version would harden. Stubborn landowner defies safety. If I fought, she'd call me combative and anti-community. Either way, I was being cast as the villain in a story she wrote before checking a single county record. I took Moose out after dark and stood by the fence, looking at the tower's silhouette against the sodium streetlight glow. I remembered bolting that permit placard myself after inspection day. I remembered my mother making lemonade for the crew and saying, "Boring infrastructure is the good kind. If nobody talks about it, it's working." Now everyone was talking. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of my gate. Message: contractor available for dismantle once board approves. Please arrange access to avoid forced entry charges. No signature, just a company footer. 5 minutes later, Patricia texted directly. First time she'd ever used my number for anything besides block party RSVPs. Recommend cooperation. If you interfere with board-authorized work, you may be trespassed from common utility corridors. I read that twice and laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity was almost elegant. She was threatening to trespass me from easements crossing my own parcel, as if authority could be manifested by confidence alone. That was the moment neighbor mode ended. I went back inside, opened my laptop, and started a new folder. Response: legal/records/county. Deeds. Plat maps. Water court abstracts. Annexation documents. Everything. If Patricia wanted conquest by handbook, she was about to meet paperwork older than her presidency. Older than the subdivision signs, older than most of the ornamental pear trees lining her residential character streets. I didn't know yet exactly which page would stop her. I only knew it existed. Recorded somewhere in county binders, thick enough to break a shelf, waiting for somebody to read them before picking a fight over a windmill. I started with the county recorder portal because it was the only office open at 10:11 p.m. and because anger is easier to steer when you give it a task. Parcel number, grantor index, Lot 1 legal description, cross-reference to the old homestead tract before final plat. I downloaded everything I could pull digitally, then made a list for what still required in-person retrieval. Annexation binder, water court decree exhibits, and any board-filed utility agreements that never got scanned. By midnight, I had 27 PDFs and one certainty. Patricia was counting on intimidation speed. 7-day deadline, public outrage, contractor threats, legal words used like a stun gun. She wanted me reacting, not reading. At 6:30 the next morning, I sent a formal invitation to Patricia, the full board, property manager Elise, and copied Code Officer Delgado. To resolve concerns, I am offering an on-site review at 5:30 p.m. today. We will walk the wind pump perimeter, inspect permit placard, review engineer letter, maintenance logs, setback compliance, storm lockout, and break assembly. Please confirm attendance. Taylor Cooper, Lot 1. I added one line for the record. Access offered in good faith to avoid unnecessary dispute escalation. At 7:12, Patricia replied all. Declined. Board will not legitimize unsafe installations through homeowner-led demonstrations. Emergency enforcement remains active pending Friday ratification vote. No one else replied. I sat with that for a minute, then sent a second email, shorter, colder. For clarity, your refusal to inspect documented safety and permit compliance is noted. That one got a private call from Elise 10 minutes later. Taylor, I saw both messages, she said. I appreciate your paper trail, but I need to tell you Patricia is calling this an imminent aesthetics and safety issue. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Imminent aesthetics. I know. Did she actually submit board packet materials? Expert opinion? Engineer concern? Anything? Another pause. No third-party report yet. Yet? She asked me for expedited counsel availability before Friday. That translated to, she was trying to get legal blessing after launching enforcement, not before, which might have worked on something like fence paint. Not this. By lunch, the neighborhood app looked like a digital mob with better landscaping. Someone posted drone footage zoomed in on the rotor head and added dramatic music. Patricia commented, "This is what happens when owners ignore community standards." Another board member added, "Friday, we restore compliance." 3 people asked if the tower could topple onto the walking path, which sat nowhere near my parcel. Facts had left the chat. I posted once, and only once. County inspected, permitted, fenced setback compliant. Board invited to inspect with documents, declined. Please refrain from spreading false hazard claims. Within 6 minutes, Patricia flagged my comment as misleading legal threat behavior. The app moderators hid the thread. That afternoon, a white pickup pulled up to my gate while I was checking the lateral valve box. The driver didn't get out. A younger guy in a reflective vest walked up, tucked a business card into the latch and said, "We're just staging availability, ma'am. No action today." Then he left before I could ask who hired them. The card read, Ridgeline Site Services, Structural Removal / Emergency Abatement / Post-Incident Hauling. On the back, in blue ink, HOA Hold for Friday Vote. WLWGLN. I took a photo, bagged the card, and emailed it to myself, Elise, and an attorney friend from college named Nia Park, who now did property and water law. Subject, need quick read. Possible wrongful abatement threat, Nia called before I finished feeding Moose. Tell me this from the top. No editorial, she said. I gave her dates, emails, permits, the refusal to inspect, contractor staging, and Patricia's trespass text. Nia made a low sound that was somewhere between impressed and offended. Okay. First, stop talking on the app. Second, preserve everything. Screenshots with timestamps, envelopes, texts, voicemails, photos. Third, do not grant any dismantle access absent court order. Expected that. Fourth, if they step onto your property for removal, call sheriff non-emergency and report active property interference. Be factual. No speeches. Got it. And Taylor, pull your chain of title and every recorded easement tied to that pump line. If this touches adjudicated diversion infrastructure, their liability exposure gets very real, very fast. I'm heading to county archives tomorrow. Good. Find the original subdivision annexation package too. Developers hide utility truths in old binders nobody reads later. After we hung up, Patricia texted again, "Hope you reconsider. Board has authority. Don't make this expensive for yourself." I didn't answer. County Records and Archives opens at 8. But the line starts forming around 7:30 with contractors, surveyors, title clerks, and one guy every week trying to prove his neighbor moved a fence 3 inches in 1998. I got there at 7:40 with coffee, a notebook, and the specific dread that comes from needing one page in a room built to lose it. At counter 3, Mrs. Calhoun recognized my last name before I handed over my ID. "Cooper from the old lateral tract?" she asked. "Unfortunately, yes." She smiled sympathetically. "You and your father were always polite under pressure. What are we hunting?" I slid over my list. Everything tied to Willow Glen annexation and utility conditions, especially water conveyance through Lot 1 and any non-interference language. Her eyebrows went up just enough to signal she understood the word fight when she heard it in bureaucratic form. "Give me 40 minutes," she said. "Some of that's still in bound files." 40 minutes became 90 because one binder came up logged to planning in 2014 and never correctly returned. While she tracked it down, I worked microfilm scans of old plat amendments. Most were exactly what you'd expect. Curb alignment tweaks, drainage notes, landscape obligations, utility trench corrections. Useful, but not decisive. At 10:03, Mrs. Calhoun rolled out a cart with 3 thick binders and set them down like delivering ammunition. "Annexation conditions, utility conveyance, and legacy reservations," she said. "Don't spill anything on these unless you want the county attorney to materialize." I took the first binder to table 6 and started flipping. Page after page of planning language, developer commitments, conditional approvals, and legal exhibits. My eyes did that records room blur where every paragraph starts sounding like every other paragraph. Hereinafter, subject to notwithstanding, except as otherwise provided, until a phrase snaps you back to full attention. It happened on Annexation Condition 14C, stapled to an exhibit map of the Cooper Lateral Crossing. Association access to domestic and irrigation reserve conveyance through Cooper Lateral is granted as perpetual easement right, conditioned upon non-interference with grantor's diversion and pumping infrastructure, including maintenance, operation, repair, and replacement. I read it once, then again slower. Conditioned upon non-interference, not requested, not encouraged, conditioned. Meaning their right to use that conveyance existed only so long as they didn't interfere with my infrastructure. My pulse jumped hard enough, I had to sit back. I kept reading. Subsection D referenced continuity planning during wildfire and electrical outage periods, naming wind-driven auxiliary lift capability as an approved backup for maintaining flow and pressure toward the association's reserve tank when municipal feed dropped. It named it. Not generic equipment, not optional improvement. Recognized system function. I took photos, then ordered certified copies. Then I moved to the second binder. Inside utility conveyance was a maintenance acknowledgement addendum signed 15 years ago by then Board President Mark Delaney and witnessed by county planning staff. It thanked my parents by name for continued allowance of auxiliary lift operation during peak demand periods. Third binder, tab 9. Board meeting minutes from September, wildfire year. Motion passed unanimously to continue annual consideration payment per legacy agreement. Amount $1 to Cooper grantor as acknowledgement of senior right and dependent association use. I laughed quietly at that. Not because it was petty, but because it was so perfectly Old West practical. $1 to preserve legal continuity, keep the agreement alive in accounting. Mail the check every year so nobody can claim abandonment. I had a shoebox at home full of those checks. I'd never cashed most of them. At 11:18, my phone buzzed. "Elise." "Do you have a minute?" she asked, voice tight. "I'm in archives. What happened?" Patricia sent notice to the board that Friday's meeting agenda now includes emergency approval for forced abatement contractor access if you fail voluntary compliance by noon Saturday. I looked at the clause in front of me and felt something in me settle from panic into focus. "Elise," I said, "did Patricia circulate the annexation condition language tied to the Cooper lateral?" Silence. Then, "I don't know what that is." "Exactly." I asked her to hold while I read the clause verbatim. She did not interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled. "Send me certified copies the second you have them." "I will." "And Elise?" "Yes." "If this board authorizes dismantling after notice of this language, they're not enforcing aesthetics. They're authorizing interference with recorded delivery infrastructure tied to the association's own water reserve." I hear you, she said, very carefully. Please send documents before end of day. By the time I got home, the mail was already in the box. One envelope had HOA letterhead and a red stamp. Final opportunity to cure prior to board action. Inside was the same 7-day threat, now bolded. I set it on the counter beside 3 certified copies from county records and started building a chronology packet. Code inspection outcome, no immediate hazard. Permit and engineering compliance documents. Good faith invitation for site review, board refusal. Public false hazard statements. Contractor staging evidence. Recorded annexation condition with non-interference clause. Legacy minutes and annual consideration acknowledgments. At 4:50 p.m., I sent a formal notice to board, manager, and copied Naya. You are now on actual notice that threaten dismantling or obstruction of the lot. One wind-driven auxiliary lift would constitute interference under recorded annexation condition 14C, tied to Willow Glen's perpetual conveyance rights through Cooper Lateral. Any enforcement action must cease pending legal review. I remain available for documented site inspection. Patricia replied, all in 12 minutes. Your interpretation is self-serving and irrelevant to modern HOA governance. Friday, vote proceeds. Nia called 2 minutes later and whistled softly when I read that sentence out loud. She wrote that in email? Yep. Great. Save it forever. That night, 2 homeowners knocked on my porch, both looking like people who hated being there. First was Mr. Alvarez from Juniper Court. I'm not taking sides, he said immediately, which is what people say when they are definitely taking a side but don't want retaliation. My wife saw all this online and got worried. Are we really talking about water impacts, or is that scare talk? I handed him a redacted copy of Annexation 14C and pointed to the reserved conveyance language. This doesn't mean your tap goes dry tomorrow, I said. It means your HOA's access to part of its backup delivery path is legally conditioned on not interfering with my infrastructure. If they interfere anyway, they create risk and liability they didn't need to create. He read it, frowned, and said, so this is like they're sawing off the branch they're sitting on? Exactly. Second was Emily from the cul-de-sac, whose kids sell lemonade every summer. She held her phone up with Patricia's latest post. Important. Opposition is spreading misinformation about water rights to avoid compliance. Emily looked embarrassed. I don't know who to believe, but if there's even a chance this affects reserves, shouldn't the board pause? Yes, I said. That's what competent governance looks like. She nodded, then lowered her voice. For what it's worth, a lot of us are tired of fear campaigns. We just didn't have documents. Now you do, I said. After they left, I printed 10 more copies. Friday came hot and windless. The kind of dry heat that makes everyone glance at hills and think about fire, whether they admit it or not. The special board meeting was scheduled for 6 in the clubhouse, but by 5:30 the parking lot was full, and people were standing along the stucco wall checking their phones for updates like we were waiting on election returns. Patricia arrived in a navy blazer with a stack of laminated slides under one arm. She walked past me without looking over, then told 2 board members, loud enough for nearby homeowners to hear, "We cannot let one parcel hold the community hostage." I almost corrected her then. Instead, I waited. Inside, Elise handed out agendas. Item 1, Emergency Hazard Ratification. Item 2, Authorization of Abatement Contractor. Item 3, Litigation Strategy. No item for legal document review. I set my packet on the table in front of me and clipped exhibit tabs A through H. Nia wasn't there in person, but she'd emailed me a 1-page script. State facts, present record, offer remedy, avoid speeches. She ended it with, "Let the documents do the yelling." At 6:04, Elise called meeting to order. Patricia took the floor first, launched her slide deck, and did exactly what I expected. Drone stills, close-up photos shot to make the tower look enormous, bullet points about community character erosion, and repeated references to catastrophic mechanical failure potential. Then she clicked to a slide labeled Legal Authority and read from HOA bylaws about nuisance abatement and exterior standards, never once mentioning county permits, recorded easements, or annexation conditions. When she finished, she looked around like she'd closed the case. Elise turned to me. "Ms. Cooper, homeowner response?" I stood, set both hands lightly on the packet, and kept my voice flat. "Yes, I have certified county records and prior board acknowledgments directly governing this structure and this association's conveyance rights." For the first time all week, Patricia's expression flickered. I held up Exhibit B. Annexation Condition 14C, recorded. Willow Glen's perpetual access to domestic and irrigation reserve conveyance through the Cooper lateral is conditioned upon non-interference with grantor diversion and pumping infrastructure. I read it verbatim into the room. Murmurs started immediately, confused, skeptical, then sharper as homeowners leaned over one another's copies. I set down Exhibit C. Subsection 14D specifically references wind-driven auxiliary lift capability for continuity during outages and peak draw. Exhibit D. Board minutes, wildfire year, acknowledging reliance on this exact backup operation. Exhibit E. Annual $1 consideration receipts acknowledging senior right and dependent use. I have originals. Copies here. One board member, Cal, the quiet one who usually voted with Patricia, raised his hand toward Elise. "Is this real?" Elise, to her credit, answered like a professional under a falling piano. "These appear to be certified copies from county records." Patricia stepped in fast. "Legacy documents are often obsolete. Our current bylaws—" I didn't interrupt her. I just placed Exhibit F on top of the stack where everyone could see the line highlighted. Conditioned upon non-interference, bylaws are powerful inside their lane. But they do not erase recorded property conditions tied to utility delivery. Everyone in that room understood that instinctively, even if they couldn't quote the case law. The atmosphere changed right there. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a collective recalculation as people realized the argument had moved from taste to contract risk. Mr. Alvarez, from the back row. "So, if we force removal and that violates this condition, what happens to our access?" No one answered immediately. That silence was the midpoint, whether anyone named it or not. Up to that second, Patricia's story was me versus community standards. After that second, the real story surfaced. The community's own water arrangement rested partly on infrastructure she was trying to rip out for optics. I looked at the board and said, "This was never a hobby tower. It's part of a legally recognized backup lift on a tract your conveyance depends on." Then I sat down and let that land. For 3 beats, nobody spoke. Then Patricia did what people like Patricia always do when facts corner them. She changed the battlefield. "Thank you," she said, smiling too brightly at the room. "What Ms. Cooper just did is exactly what I warned about. Weaponizing obscure legacy language to intimidate residents." A few homeowners shifted, uncertain again. She clicked her remote and a new slide appeared. Immediate risk management options. Option A, emergency court filing to clarify authority. Option B, temporary immobilization of disputed apparatus. Option C, contractor standby for rapid abatement. I felt my spine go stiff. You're proposing enforcement after notice of conditional non-interference? I'm proposing safety while lawyers sort out your interpretation. She shot back. Elise leaned toward her microphone. For process, we should pause and get association counsel to review the certified record before any vote. Patricia ignored her. I move the board authorize immediate temporary immobilization of the wind structure for 72 hours pending legal opinion. Cal looked torn. Immobilization means what exactly? Locking the rotor and restricting owner access to the apparatus, Patricia said. No dismantle tonight, just stabilization. Owner access, I said. It's on my parcel. It interfaces with common utility dependency, she said, as if saying nonsense confidently could turn it into statute. From the side wall, someone called out, "Can she just do that?" Patricia answered before anyone else could. Under emergency nuisance authority, yes. Elise's jaw tightened. That statement is disputed. Patricia produced a printed email and held it up. Association Council Preliminary Guidance. Board may take temporary protective action where safety concern is alleged. I knew that trick too. Read one permissive sentence, leave out all conditions and caveats. Read the rest, I said. She didn't. Board member Jenna asked, "Does council mention interference language?" Patricia hesitated half a second. Council has not completed full historical review. So, you want to vote before full review, I said. Patricia turned to the room, palms up, wounded stateswoman now. If this tower fails while we wait, every one of you will ask why we did nothing. Fear did what fear does. It moved quicker than logic. Cal looked at his notes, then at me. Taylor, if this is truly about water continuity, a 72-hour pause shouldn't matter, right? In a mild week, maybe not. In late-season heat with planned grid maintenance, absolutely it could. Pause can matter, I said. An unauthorized lockout is itself interference. Patricia jumped on that. Threat noted for the record. I didn't threaten you, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I stated legal consequence. But the room was already sliding away from technical language into tribal posture. Elise tried once more. I strongly recommend table this motion until council, Patricia, call the vote. It passed 3-2. Cal voted yes, Jenna no, Patricia yes. 2 others yes and abstain turned yes after Patricia whispered, liability. Motion language, as read aloud. Authorize Ridgeline Site Services to install temporary immobilization controls on the wind structure and establish a safety perimeter restricting owner operation pending council review. I stood before adjournment and said, clearly for the minutes, I object to any entry for immobilization as unlawful interference under recorded condition and reserve all rights. Patricia wrote something down and didn't look up. Objection noted. By 8:11 p.m., 2 Ridgeline trucks were idling outside my gate with amber lights spinning. A sheriff's deputy stood near the ditch line, hands clasped, expression neutral in that practiced way that means I'm here so no one gets hurt, not to decide who's right. Cal was there too, avoiding eye contact. Board authorized temporary stabilization, he said when I walked up. Please don't make this ugly. You made it ugly at 6 o'clock, I said. The crew lead handed me a clipboard, just acknowledging we notified occupant. I didn't sign. They brought in a man lift, climbed my tower, and cinched a steel lock collar through the rotor hub and brake arm. I filmed every second from behind the fence line. Timestamp on, narration on, names, tools, sequence. Halfway through, One tech forced the brake lever too hard. I heard a sharp metallic pop and saw the tail vane jerk offline. "Stop," I shouted. "You just over-torqued the linkage." He froze, looked down at the foreman, got a shrug, then kept going. When they were done, the rotor sat dead fixed, tail canted a few degrees wrong. They wrapped yellow caution tape on my own fence and zip-tied a laminated sign, "Do not operate, HOA safety order." I wanted to rip it down so badly my hands shook. Instead, I filmed that too. The deputy gave me a tired nod before leaving. "Ma'am, document your concerns through counsel." "I am," I said. I slept maybe 2 hours. At 4:37 a.m., the utility app pinged. Planned electrical load shed event 5 to 8, due to substation transfer. At 6:12, my pressure gauge told the rest of the story. Drop, recover, drop again. By 7, group texts were lighting up. Anyone else have weak shower pressure? Sprinklers sputtering. What's going on with tank refill? At 8:03, Patricia posted on the neighborhood app. Temporary pressure fluctuation due to private owner infrastructure dispute. Board actively protecting community. I stared at that sentence and laughed once, hollow. By 9, I got a call from the water district operator I knew from years of dull, useful conversations. "Taylor, off the record, your backup assist usually smooths this kind of morning," he said. "You offline?" "Locked by HOA order." He swore under his breath. "Great." At 10:19, formal notice arrived by email from the watermaster's office. Complaint filed alleging threatened interruption of conveyance by grantor parcel owner. Administrative inquiry opened. All parties ordered to preserve status quo pending preliminary review. Status quo, in theory, should have protected me. In practice, it froze everything in place, including a damaged, padlocked windmill I couldn't touch without someone claiming violation. Noon brought a second hit. Nia's office sent engagement terms. To move fast, injunctive relief response, property interference claim prep, water rights defense. I needed a retainer wired by 3 p.m. I transferred money out of the savings account I'd been holding for roof replacement and emergency vet care for Moose. Watching the balance drop felt like swallowing gravel. By late afternoon, people who had nodded at me for years were staring in the grocery lot. One guy I barely knew muttered, "Hope your little rights crusade was worth dry taps." I went home with canned soup and a headache that had settled behind my eyes like a nail. The setback wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was procedural, expensive, and sticky. My documents were strong, but Patricia had succeeded in creating a temporary reality where I was legally boxed, mechanically compromised, and socially blamed. And it was going to take time. Time, money, and luck, with the right official on the right day, to unbox it. That evening, I stood by the fence with Moose, while hot wind rattled the caution tape around my tower. The lock collar glinted in the sunset like handcuffs. For the first time since this started, I thought, what if she wins the months? Even if I win the law? What if she drains me before judgment ever lands? Nia sat alone in her office at 11:48 p.m. Courthouse annex lights gone dark across the street, the blue-white glow of her monitor flattening everything into fatigue. On paper, this case was clean. Recorded condition, documented notice, physical interference, probable damages. In real life, clean cases still bled. She rubbed at the ache between her shoulders and opened the scanned annexation page again, reading the same sentence for the 10th time. Not because she doubted it, but because she needed to feel certainty somewhere. Conditioned upon non-interference. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt 21 again, standing in her parents' kitchen while her father explained they were selling the back 40 because they'd lost a paper fight over access they thought was handshake solid. She remembered her mother crying quietly into a dish towel, angry at herself for trusting people who smiled at church and filed behind their backs. That was the wound law school never erased. The knowledge that facts are not enough if you're late, outspent, or outmaneuvered in the first 72 hours. She leaned back and closed her eyes. She told Taylor, breezy and competent, that they had this. She hadn't told her she was scared of failing someone she... what? Cared about? Had always cared about, if she was honest. Since college labs and bad coffee and that one night on the stadium bleachers when Taylor had talked about inheriting land like it was both gift and burden. Nia had nearly kissed her then and talked herself out of it because timing, because ambition, because she was always choosing the practical road right up until it left her alone with excellent billing records. Her phone buzzed. Partner message. We represent Willow Glen's carrier on unrelated matters. Conflict waiver required if this escalates. Proceed carefully. Proceed carefully. Translation. Don't blow up institutional relationships for one homeowner, no matter how right she is. Nia stared at the text until it blurred. She drafted the waiver request, sent it, and knew in her gut it might not come back fast enough. If denied, she'd have to withdraw and hand Taylor to outside counsel cold in the middle of emergency filings. The thought made her stomach turn. She opened a new document instead. Emergency Response Template, Verified Declaration Outline, Exhibits List. Fingers moving now. Fear converted to work, the only alchemy she trusted. At 1:06 a.m., she finally called Taylor and got voicemail. Hey, she said, voice softer than she intended. I'm still up. I'm still on this. If they move again, call me before you call anyone else. Actually, call sheriff too, then me. We're not late yet. We're not late. She hung up and sat in silence, breathing through the old panic. Then she whispered to the empty office, please let me not be late. At 5:42 a.m., pounding on my front door jolted me awake. Not a polite knock, fist on wood urgency. I opened to find Jenna from the board in running clothes, hair still damp with sweat, phone clutched like evidence. Patricia filed in district court at dawn, she said. Ex parte request, she got a temporary order. My mouth went dry. What order? Restraining you from interfering with HOA safety access, pending hearing at 9. They're saying you threatened to suspend neighborhood water delivery. She shoved the screen at me. I read as fast as adrenaline allows. Declarations attached, Patricia's statements, screenshots from the app, selected email lines stripped of context, and one especially creative claim that my hostage language created imminent risk to public welfare. There, in black and white, was my own warning about strict priority administration, quoted as extortion instead of legal notice. Where did they get supporting declaration? I asked. Jenna looked sick. Cal signed one. He says Patricia told him council approved all facts. Headlights swept my yard. I turned. Ridgeline convoy. 3 trucks this time, plus flatbed. No amber lights now. Work lights. A process server jogged up my walkway with a packet and handed it over while reading script. I signed receipt with a hand that didn't feel connected to me. Behind him, Patricia stepped out of her SUV in a hard hat she had no reason to wear and pointed toward my back lane like a foreman at a demolition. Nia's car came in fast from the opposite direction, gravel spitting under her tires. She was out before the engine fully cut, messenger bag over one shoulder, eyes already scanning the order. Do not speak to Patricia, she said to me without looking up. Not one word. She read, flipped pages, read again. This is narrow but dangerous. It grants access for stabilization and hazard mitigation pending hearing. They'll argue dismantle is mitigation. Can we stop them? At 9? Maybe. At 6:30? Only if we get emergency clarification from duty judge or force sheriff to treat dismantle as exceeding scope. As if summoned, a sheriff supervisor truck rolled up. Patricia was already walking toward him with a folder and that same campaign smile. Nia grabbed my arm, hard enough to anchor me. "Taylor, listen to me. We need certified and annexation copies, the refusal to inspect emails, and video of last night's over-torque damage in one packet right now. If we miss framing before they touch steel, we're reacting all day." "They're here now." "I know." The first ridgeline worker was unloading cutting equipment. Hot wind snapped the yellow caution tape against my fence. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler coughed twice and went silent. Nia took one breath, squared her shoulders, and marched toward the sheriff with the TRO in one hand and Annexation Condition 14C in the other. I stayed at the gate, packet pressed to my chest, watching two legal theories and one very real set of power tools converge on my windmill. And for the first time, I honestly didn't know which one would win in time. I didn't move from the gate until I heard Nia's voice cut across the lane like a saw blade. "Sergeant, before you authorize any physical work, you need this in your hand." She held out the certified annexation page. The sheriff's supervisor, a broad man with sunburned ears and a pen clipped perfectly straight to his vest, took it, scanned the header, then looked up at Patricia. Patricia was already in performance stance. Hard hat, folder, righteous urgency. "We have a court order. They are obstructing safety mitigation." Nia kept her voice controlled. "Your order allows stabilization pending hearing. It does not authorize dismantling, cutting, or impairment of recorded water delivery infrastructure." Read paragraph 3 and paragraph 5 together. The sergeant did. Behind him, Ridgeline had a torch cart halfway off the flatbed. I stepped forward and held up my phone. "Sergeant, I need this logged. Last night, this same crew over-torqued the brake linkage during unauthorized lockout. I have video, time-stamped." Patricia snapped toward me. "Unauthorized? It was board-approved." "Board-approved doesn't erase recorded conditions," I said, louder than I meant to. Nia didn't look at me. "Taylor, video." I sent it to her on the spot. She played it for the sergeant. Close shot of the tech wrenching the lever, the metallic pop, my voice yelling "Stop," foreman waving him on. The sergeant watched twice, then turned to Ridgeline. "Who's your site lead?" Foreman raised his hand. "Put the cutters back on the truck, right now. No one touches structure until I get duty judge clarification." Patricia actually stomped once, heel to gravel. "Sergeant, that's not your role. The court already found imminent risk." "Ma'am," he said evenly, "my role is to prevent a bad scene from getting worse before 9 a.m. Nia stepped in. "We're filing oral request for immediate scope clarification and dissolution at hearing. We will be there. All parties can be there. That's the process." Patricia laughed once, sharp. "Fine, we'll do it in front of a judge. Again." She said again like she had already won. At 8:52, we were in Department 4. Me, Nia, Patricia, Association Counsel, who looked like he hadn't known about half this until sunrise, and Cal, in a wrinkled polo clutching his declaration packet like it might bite him. Judge Harrow came in at 9:03 with reading glasses low on his nose and the expression of a man who disliked surprise filings before coffee. "Counsel," he said, scanning. I issued a narrow temporary order based on submitted declarations alleging imminent physical hazard and threatened water interruption. I am now advised there are recorded annexation conditions not disclosed in the ex parte packet. We'll start there. Nia stood. Yes, Your Honor. Certified record, annexation condition 14C, filed with County Conditions Association conveyance rights on non-interference with Grantor pumping infrastructure. Also 14D, specific recognition of wind-driven auxiliary lift continuity function. She handed copies up. Judge Harrow read, flipped, read again. Miss Hensley, he said to Patricia directly before counsel could intercept. Were you aware of these provisions when you sought this order? Patricia lifted her chin. I was aware of old rural references that are irrelevant to modern HOA governance. A beat of silence. The judge turned a page slowly. You signed the board's annual utility right renewal acknowledgement last year. Nia slid Exhibit F forward, the signature page with Patricia's neat looping name under a paragraph referencing condition compliance. Patricia's attorney closed his eyes for half a second. Judge Harrow's voice cooled 10 degrees. Then the court was materially misled by omission. Patricia started, Your Honor, we acted for safety. He raised a hand. I'm not done. He turned to me. Ms. Cooper, did you threaten to cut neighborhood water? I stood because my knees insisted on doing something. No, Your Honor. I gave legal notice that if unlawful interference continued, I would petition for strict priority administration through the watermaster. That is a regulated process, not a shut-off threat. I have draft notice and counsel correspondence. Nia handed those up too. Harrow read the language, then looked at Cal. Mr. Calderon, your declaration states Ms. Cooper boasted she could turn off the block. Source? Cal swallowed hard. President Hensley briefed me. I did not hear that directly. The judge wrote something on the file with deliberate pressure. Temporary order is dissolved, he said. Effective immediately. HOA and agents are enjoined from entering Lot 1 for structure interference absent further court approval. Existing lock apparatus to be removed by neutral technician within 24 hours under owner observation. Costs to association pending allocation. Patricia opened her mouth. He kept going. Further, I set an order to show cause regarding sanctions for ex parte omissions. And I recommend, strongly, that the association hold an immediate open meeting with full legal review before taking another enforcement step touching utility easements. He looked at me. Ms. Cooper, if you pursue water administration remedies, do so through proper channels and avoid inflammatory public phrasing. Yes, Your Honor. Good. We are adjourned. The gavel wasn't dramatic. It was small, wood on wood. But I felt it all the way down my spine. Outside the courtroom, Patricia spun toward me in the hallway. This isn't over, she hissed. You're holding the community hostage with antique paperwork. For once, I didn't snap back. No, I said. I'm holding the line where it was recorded before you bought your first throw pillow in Willow Glen. Nia touched my elbow. Don't. We walked out into white heat and siren-far city noise. And by noon, Elise had sent emergency notice. Special HOA session, 6 p.m. clubhouse. Mandatory open forum. Council present. By 6, every folding chair was full, and half the room stood along the walls. No drone footage this time, no app theatrics. Just homeowners with printouts, sweat dark collars, and the specific look people wear when they realize governance can cost them real money. Patricia still opened with slides. Tonight is about hazard mitigation and preserving standards. I let her finish all 12 slides, including the one with red circles around my rotor like she'd discovered enemy artillery. When Elise called homeowner response, I stood and carried my binder to the front table. Before comment, I said, I move to enter Exhibits A through F into the meeting record and display on screen. Patricia scoffed. Objection. This is not a courtroom. Association counsel Mr. Leong spoke up for the first time all night. Madam President, given today's order and potential sanctions, I advise full record transparency. Patricia glared at him like betrayal had a billing rate. Elise nodded to the AV guy. My documents went up one by one. Exhibit A, recorded easement map with Cooper lateral crossing. Exhibit B, annexation 14C, non-interference clause. Exhibit C, 14D, continuity language naming wind-driven auxiliary lift. Exhibit D, wildfire year board minutes thanking my parents. Exhibit E, annual $1 consideration receipts. Exhibit F, last year's renewal acknowledgement with Patricia's signature. I didn't editorialize. I read each heading, each key line, and then stopped. Then I placed one more paper on the table. A drafted notice, dated and signed. Because the HOA initiated unlawful interference and threatened destruction of protected infrastructure, I said, I am prepared to file this tomorrow with the Watermaster and District, suspension of voluntary operating accommodations, and petition for strict priority administration until compliance is restored. The room went still enough I could hear the AC kick on. I kept my voice flat. This is legal. It is not my preference. It is immediate if filed. Patricia pounced. There. She admits coercion. I turned to homeowners, not her. No. I'm stating consequence. You cannot demand the benefits of a conveyance while violating the condition attached to it. Mr. Alvarez stood from the third row. Counsel, answer plainly. If board keeps fighting and she files priority administration, are we exposed? Mr. Leong cleared his throat. Potentially, yes. There is material risk of service disruption patterns, increased procurement costs, and significant litigation exposure. Emily raised her hand without waiting. And legal fees? Assessments? Possible, Leong said. Cal spoke next, voice rough. I voted for lockout. I was wrong. I move we rescind all violations against Lot 1 immediately. Patricia slammed a palm on the table. Out of order. Chair is not recognized. Jenna stood. I second Cal's motion. Patricia snapped. You don't get to hijack agenda because one owner brought a scare packet. I stepped forward 1 inch, no more. Then let's make a different motion, on agenda if you prefer. Elise looked at me. State it. I did, reading from my page exactly as Nia and I had drafted. Motion for full rescission of all enforcement actions related to Lot 1 wind pump. Written covenant of non-interference with recorded diversion and pumping infrastructure. Reimbursement of owner legal costs incurred responding to unlawful action. Removal of all posted hazard notices from owner property. And public correction to association membership within 10 days. Murmurs rose. Someone in back said, Vote. Patricia tried one more tactic. If we cave now, every homeowner with a rusted shed will waive fake historical claims. Nia, from the side wall where she'd stayed quiet, finally spoke. Then read your records before sending contractors. A few people laughed. Short, shocked laughs from people not sure if laughing was allowed. Patricia pointed at Nia. Outside counsel for one homeowner does not dictate this board. Mr. Leong didn't flinch. As association counsel, I strongly recommend adopting Ms. Cooper's motion in full. That landed harder than anything I'd said. Patricia looked around for allies and found faces turned away. Fine, she said. voice trembling with fury. Roll call. Put everyone on record. Elise called names. Jenna? Yes. Cal? Yes. Mr. Benson? Yes. Ms. Ruiz? Yes. Then Patricia, last by custom. She sat very still, jaw tight enough to show a pulse at her temple. No. Motion passes, 4-1, Elise said. You could feel the room exhale. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just sat down because my legs had started to shake, and I didn't trust them. Patricia gathered her slides with clipped, furious movements. You're all making a catastrophic governance error. Cal answered quietly. No, Pat. We made one already. She looked like she might throw the remote. Instead, she stood, squared her blazer, and said to no one in particular, "This board has lost discipline." Then she walked out past me without a glance, hard heels striking the tile like punctuation. When the room finally thinned, the adrenaline dropped out of me so fast I had to grip the back of a folding chair. Elise came over with a stack of papers and eyes that said she'd aged 6 months this week. I'll circulate draft rescission by morning. Council will send reimbursement procedure tonight. Are you okay to stay long enough to verify language? Yeah, I said, though my voice came out thin. Nia appeared beside me with a bottle of water. Drink. I obeyed like a kid told to sit down after nearly passing out at summer camp. By 9:14 p.m., we had line edits done. The phrase, without admission, disappeared at my insistence. Public correction became public correction and retraction. May reimburse became shall reimburse within 10 business days. I initialed each page. So did Elise. So did Mr. Leong. Outside, Ridgeline's neutral technician waited at my gate under sheriff observation to remove the lock collar per court order. I made them document tool settings before touching the brake arm. The tech who'd over-torqued wasn't there. When the collar came off, the rotor twitched once in the night breeze, then settled. The bent linkage was visible now, subtle but real. Needs replacement before operation, I said. The neutral tech nodded. I'll write it exactly that way. Please do. At 10:02, the last signature landed on the temporary non-interference covenant. I slid the copy into my binder and felt, for the first time all week, something like oxygen. I walked to the base of the tower with Moose pressing against my leg. The caution tape was gone. The fake hazard sign was gone. Overhead, stars were coming through that dusty summer haze. Nia stood a few steps back and giving me space. I touched the tower leg, cool metal under my palm. You still here? I asked without turning. Yeah. You don't have to be. I know. I nodded. Okay. Crisis mode had been noise, motion, list-making, legal verbs. Its absence felt strange, like stepping off a train and still feeling the tracks. I turned toward the house. I need coffee, or bourbon, or maybe both. Nia gave a tired half smile. I vote coffee first. We still have sanctions briefing to plan. Right, I said, and we both laughed once, because of course we did. We ended up on my back porch at midnight with 2 mugs, 1 legal pad, and no pretense left. The air had cooled just enough to carry the smell of cut hay from somewhere down the road. Moose lay under the table with his chin on my boot. The windmill stood dark and still, waiting on a new linkage. Nia stared into her coffee for a long time before speaking. I need to tell you something before this turns into just another case debrief. I set my mug down. Okay. She folded and unfolded the corner of a legal pad page, a habit I remembered from college exam nights. My firm sent me a conflict warning last night, she said, because they represent Willow Glen's carrier on unrelated matters. I asked for waiver. If they denied it, I might have had to withdraw right when you needed emergency filings. My chest tightened. You didn't tell me. I didn't want you splitting focus at 6 a.m. while people with power tools were at your fence. She looked up finally. That was a call I made. Maybe wrong, but I made it. What happened? Waiver came through at 8:40. Barely. I was already drafting transfer notes in case it didn't. I let that settle, then nodded. Thank you for making the call, even if I hate imagining that timeline. Me too. Silence stretched, not awkward, just full. Then she exhaled and went on. There's another thing. The reason I reacted so hard to this case. My parents lost land in a paper fight when I was a kid. Access language they trusted wasn't recorded right. I watched them get outmaneuvered by people who were faster and calmer and better funded. I built my whole career around never being late to that kind of fight again. Her mouth twitched like she hated how much this mattered. Today in court, when Harrow asked if he'd been misled, I had this flash of being 12 in our kitchen hearing my dad say, "We should have filed sooner." I was terrified of being late for you. I swallowed. Nia. She cut in softly. And I wasn't just terrified because you're a client. There it was. I held still. She laughed once, breathy and unsteady. God, I bill in 6-minute increments for a living, and somehow I cannot say one sentence cleanly. I waited. She met my eyes. I have been in love with you, off and on, and then mostly on since college. I buried it under work and distance and good reasons. When you called this week, I told myself it was just legal duty. It wasn't. The night sounded suddenly loud. The dry rustle in the junipers, Moose's collar tag tapping the chair leg, my own pulse. I looked down at my hands, then back at her. I thought I imagined that on the stadium bleachers, senior year. Her eyes widened. You remember that? I remember thinking if I leaned an inch closer, I'd ruin a friendship I couldn't afford to lose. Then you took the internship in Denver, and I inherited a farm-shaped legal puzzle, and we did what practical women do. We got busy. She nodded, eyes bright now. Yeah. I leaned back and let out a breath I think I'd been holding for years. I'm not good at this part. I'm good at records and valves and telling a board where the line is. But if you're asking whether this is one-sided, no. It never was. Nia went very still. Say that again. It was never one-sided. She blinked fast, then laughed through it. I cross-examined hostile witnesses today, and this is the part that makes me shaky. Same. We sat in that for another beat. Then she asked the practical question, because of course she did. What do we do with this, given you're currently my client and we are both ethically anxious people? I smiled despite myself. We do it right. Finish active filings. Transition anything still open to separate counsel if needed. No blurred lines in court. Clear lines at home. At home, she repeated, testing the word. I nodded. If you want that. She stood, came around the table, and stopped in front of me close enough that I could see the tiny ink smudge on her thumb from marking exhibits. I want that, she said. I stood too. The kiss wasn't cinematic. It was better. Slow, careful, both of us smiling into it, like we couldn't quite believe we had finally stopped pretending. When we pulled back, Moose sighed dramatically under the table like we were interrupting his sleep schedule. Nia laughed against my shoulder. Even your dog has opinions. He survived 3 HOA presidencies. He's earned them. She rested her forehead against mine. I'm still scared of messing this up. Good, I said. Means we'll pay attention. She nodded, then kissed me again, and the week's noise finally quieted. 10 days later, the clubhouse smelled like burnt coffee and fresh photocopies when Elise stood at the front with a prepared statement. On behalf of the Willow Glen HOA, she read, voice steady. The association rescinds all citations issued to Lot 1 regarding the permitted agricultural wind pump, acknowledges prior enforcement actions were undertaken without full legal document review, and retracts prior hazard assertions not supported by county findings. She looked up. Association has reimbursed legal fees as approved. New policy packet is at the back. Mandatory council review for enforcement affecting recorded easements, waterworks, or legacy infrastructure. A few people actually clapped. Not many, but enough. I sat beside Naya in the third row. She squeezed my fingers once, under the agenda packet. Patricia was there, 2 rows ahead, rigid as rebar. When Homeowner Forum opened, Mr. Alvarez stood first. I move no confidence in current president for initiating enforcement without reading utility documents and for omitting material records in emergency filings. Second came from Emily before he finished the sentence. Patricia rose slowly, face pale but composed. If this community prefers paralysis to standards, I will not stand in the way. She set her binder on the table with precise care. I resign effective immediately. No one cheered, no one booed. It was quieter than that, like a storm finally passing and everyone checking the damage. Elise moved to nominations. A retired engineer named Ron Mercer, white beard, irrigation cap, the man who once corrected my gate hinge with a torque wrench he carried in his trunk, was elected by acclamation after saying, "I don't do drama, I do schematics." His first motion as interim president, ratify the non-interference covenant permanently. Second, Ms. Cooper, if you're willing, I'd like to appoint you volunteer liaison for water system coordination so we stop learning hydrology from social media. I stood. I'm willing. After meeting, kids ran circles in the parking lot, while adults did the awkward reconciliation dance. Cal found me by the bulletin board. I owe you an apology, he said. I signed what I didn't verify. You corrected it when it mattered. Still, he offered his hand. I'm sorry. I took it. At sunset, Ron came by my fence with a paint can and a grin. Heard you were touching up the tower after linkage replacement. Brought primer. By the time we finished, the windmill looked almost proud. Fresh gray coat, new linkage, brake tested, lockout verified. I screwed a small plaque to the fence where contractors couldn't miss it. Permitted agricultural pump, do not tamper. Nia read it, smiling. Subtle. I was going to add statutory citations, but you said no. I said maybe smaller font. Later, as dusk settled, a county truck rolled slowly past the lane. Officer Delgado leaned out the window, took in the new paint, the plaque, the intact fence. Looks compliant, he called. I laughed. By county standards? He grinned and drove on. I stood at the gate with Nia's hand in mine, the tower turning easy in a light evening wind, and listened to sprinklers start up and hold steady across the block that drinks through Cooper water rights.